I want to tell you a little bit more about the habit of ferocity. I want to give you an example. And the place I want to start is with a really simple idea, which is that excellence always has a cost. We all start with the same amount of energy, pretty much, and the same 24 hours in every day. Excellence is always going to take everything you got. So on a certain level, it takes the same amount of energy and time to be the best dry cleaner in Cleveland, Ohio, as it does to take on a world-changing challenge like poverty or water scarcity. Of course it does. We all have the same 24 hours in a day. In fact, I want to tell you a story to kind of emphasize this point. So years ago, when I was starting out my career, I started out as a journalist. And I was always hunting around for really interesting stories. So I was always asking people, hey, what's the strangest thing you've heard about in the world? And I asked a friend of mine this question at one point. He said, yeah, there's this guy. He's put up a $10 million prize for the first person or small team that builds a reusable spaceship, that flies a spaceship twice into space in 2 weeks. They're calling it the X Prize or something. You should check it out. So I did. And this is how I met Peter Diamandis. And I ended up writing the first kind of big national article on Peter and the X Prize. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the X Prize, Peter's goal was to unlock the space frontier. He wanted to make it possible for you and me to go into space in our lifetime. And to do that, he created a contest, the X Prize. It was $10 million for the first team to send a spaceship into space twice in 2 weeks. The reusability of the spaceship was a big deal because at that point, the best spaceship in the world was NASA's space shuttle, and it wasn't reusable, and it cost billions and billions of dollars every time it wanted to return to space. So this was a big deal. So when I was reporting the story, I went out and I talked to NASA and big government space agencies. And you have to remember, at this time, space was a monopoly. It was either big governments or super large corporations. Those were the only people who got to play with space. So I went and talked to the big governments. I talked to NASA. I said, hey, is this even possible? And they said, no, it's totally crazy. He's out of his mind. You would need tens of thousands of engineers to pull it off. It would take tens of billions of dollars. He's not going to do it. It's crazy. Then I went and I talked to the aerospace contractors, Boeing and Airbus and all those companies. And they basically said the exact same thing, only in much more colorful language. Everybody was convinced the X Prize was absolutely, completely impossible. And yet, 8 years later, a guy named Burt Rutan won the X Prize. And did it take tens of billions of dollars? No, it actually took $25,000. Did it take hundreds of thousands of engineers? No, it actually took about a team of about 30 people. The point here is Peter and the people who participated in the X Prize took on and accomplished the impossible. They did something nobody thought was possible. And because Peter and I became really good friends along the way, I got to watch him do the impossible up close and in person. What did it look like? Peter got up. He took a shower. He had breakfast. He had a conversation. He worked on his computer. He got in his car. He drove someplace. He had another conversation. He worked on his computer. He picked up the phone. He had a conversation. He had something more to eat. Maybe he went to the bathroom. Maybe he went to the gym. That's what it looked like day after day. That's actually what impossible looks like from the inside. I've seen it over and over and over, and it looks exactly like that. In other words, it doesn't look that different from what you do all day long. There are three distinguishing characteristics, three things that actually separate people who can tackle the impossible from everybody else. First thing that you've got to care about is the size of the original vision. Peter wanted to unlock the space frontier. It was a huge vision. So that's where we're going to start with the habit of ferocity. We're going to start out working on passion and purpose and helping you tune up the size of your vision. The next thing that matters is the amount of flow in the equation. We're going to break down flow, this state of optimal performance, and we'll talk about how it plays into the habit of ferocity. And finally, there's the habit of ferocity itself, the ability to automatically and instinctively rise to any challenge. Now, I want to talk a little bit about why this habit is so critical. The Navy SEALs have a saying. They say you don't rise to the occasion, you sink to the level of your training. So whenever we encounter a challenge in life, right, whether or not we think we're going to be able to bring our best, we often don't end up being able to pull it off. We often revert to the level of our training. And there's a reason why this is the case. It's standard neurobiology. The more fear enters the equation, the more norepinephrine, which is one of the main neurochemicals that underpins fear, enters the equation, the size of the database searched by the brain's pattern recognition system, I know those are a lot of words, I'll explain them in a second, shrinks. So in other words, the fight or flight response is the great example of this. When we face an acute threat, when the brain has to deal with something that's really, really dangerous that's coming right at us, it shrinks our possible choices, our options, what we can do to 3. We can fight, we can flee, or we can freeze. Now the same thing on a smaller scale actually happens when we encounter any of life's challenges. Our options start to shrink, creativity starts to decline, and this gets in the way of our performance. So if you don't automatize grit, if you don't automatize risk-taking, whenever life's challenges start to show up, you're going to end up tripping over your own fear. It's basic biology. The other side of this, and the real reason the habit of ferocity is so important, is compound interest. I said yesterday that this is about what you can do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, repeat on and on and on. It's about learning how to go a couple inches farther on Monday, a couple inches farther on Tuesday, just than you would normally go. These are not huge leaps and bounds. It's a couple inches, and a couple inches, and a couple inches. But week after week, month after month, year after year, those inches add up into feet, add up into miles, and you end up so much farther than you possibly ever understood you could get on your own power. And that's what we're looking for. I want you to wake up one day and go, holy shit, look at what I've accomplished. The way you're going to have that reaction is by doing a couple inches farther every day, over and over and over, and automatizing that kind of momentum. The goal of this class isn't for you to create a life that meets your expectations. The goal of this class is that you create a life that massively exceeds your expectations. But if you want an extraordinary life, you have to learn to take extraordinary measures. So welcome to the habit of ferocity. So for you to get the most out of this class, we've broken it into 3 phases. There's an onboarding phase. This is a preparation phase. Here we're going to sort of do our pre-qualified testing so we can measure your learning at the front end of this class. We're going to train you up in some of the basics of flow. Then we have an installation phase. The installation phase is sort of a one-off exercise. It's going to help you turn curiosity into passion, into purpose. It's the platform upon which the rest of the class is built. Then we're going to get to the bulk of the course, the learning phase. In the onboarding phase, in the installation phase, these are going to be one-offs. Exercises you're going to do once, maybe periodically you'll go back to them over the course of your life. But in the learning phase, we're going to train up a bunch of daily habits. These are things you're going to want to integrate on a daily basis now for the rest of your life that'll really, really help you develop the habit of ferocity. To get started, take the pre-quest self-assessment, and I'll be with you guys tomorrow.